and welcome to Monday Night Football live on Radio Saltaire. My name is Sam Meakin. I will be your host for this evening. Joining me in the studio are Hibby. I'll pull the plurals.
He is a closet Hibby.
That is true, actually. I should have just committed to the full studio of Hibbies. Joining me are Hibby Mark Smith and Jambo Scott McIntosh. Well, we say Jambo, but... So
I've got the tattoo to prove it.
Oh, is that what it is?
He's a Jambi.
Right, let's get started. This week we will end with a big preview of a big League Cup tie. So we thought we would focus on that very competition for our opening question. So we are going with your favourite League Cup memories and the moments in said competition that you would like to forget. Mark, do you want to start us off with some Hibs moments, seen as they are the team of the big game in that competition this weekend?
What are you asking first? Best or worst?
Whichever way you want to go, mate. What kind of mood you feeling in?
I'm feeling rather pessimistic today.
Right, give me your worst first then.
Worst first, oh. Well, back from when I remember, actually, I've been quite a lot of League Cup finals. I look back to the Dunfermline game when I was just a wee kid, travelling through on old first bus, stinking of fags and booze from about 50 folk on a double-decker bus. Back in 1990 when we beat Dunfermline 2-0. That was my first ever experience of a cup final, and it was fantastic. Remember it well. I think Keith Wright scored and Tommy McIntyre, if I remember rightly. Mm-hmm. And then more modern days, there was the victory over Kilmarnock, where we just I remember I was gutted because I had a fiver on Rob Jones, 3 to score first and 3-4 and 5-0. And we won 5-1, and I'm sure Jones scored first, if I remember right. It cost me about 250 quid. But for me, probably the most memorable would be the 5-1 League Cup final. Worst would probably be the Livingston game.
Right, Scott, clarify. Did you say finals aside in this question?
Yes. But right, to defend Mark, not only did Craig Leach get in touch with us with the cup finals, but also about 50% of the people who responded online as well.
So we'll open it up now. It was your confusing question asking abilities.
Yes, it's my fault for saying the words cup finals aside.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so the cup finals are both the positive and the negative side of it for you then, Mark?
Yes.
That makes perfect sense.
There's been plenty of them.
Is there any non-cup final game that sticks out on either side? Is there any particular League Cup game where you think... Because obviously League Cup in this country nowadays doesn't tend to get the same hype, it doesn't get the same build-up or focus, but now and again it throws up an absolute brammer of a tie or an unexpected victory. Is there anything like that sticks out in your head? Or a nightmare?
It's like the run to get to the Livingston Cup final aside, I'm sure back to back we beat both sides of the Old Firm.
Yep.
We both beat Rangers and then we beat Celtic, and you know, it was that young influential team with Thompson, Brown, O'Connor, Reardon. I thought they were going to stroll the cup final and they didn't.
Yeah, if you want to hear more about that cup run, we spoke about that in quite a lot of detail with Kevin Thompson in his interview, so if you check that out on the Monday Night Football Podbean and the iTunes feed, you'll hear a lot about that cup run there and those 2 games against the Old Firm. Scott, give me your Hearts memories. Let's start with the negative first.
Yeah, this has kind of got a mix of good and bad about it, because the actual trip itself was quite memorable. So I just turned 18, was really starting to kind of branch out and go to, you know, pretty much every away game that there was, rather than just the ones that I could afford with my pocket money. I actually had a full-time job by this stage, so I remember going for one ill-fated trip up to Dingwall on a very cold Tuesday night in September 2001 with the Luckies Hearts bus. Now this would be the only time that I'd ever run with the Luckies bus, and it was certainly a memorable trip. I remember many renditions of many songs that would now be probably banned on the bus going up there. Not that I was partaking in it, but I do remember it. I also remember being present when someone decided to throw a chair at Chris Robinson before the game. I also managed to witness Hearts. I mean, it's one thing to get knocked out in a game, but typical Hearts, we drew 0-0. we kept on drawing 0-0 throughout extra time, and then got beat on penalties. So it was literally about 11 o'clock before we actually left Dingwall, and by that stage someone else from another bus tried to, there was basically no stewarding at the corner. This is back when they were still terracing at Dingwall, the away end. So someone actually managed to get onto trackside and walk round to the Hearts dugout, and was literally in Craig Levine's face at the end of the game. So yeah, it was definitely a memorable trip. I do remember shouting abuse at Stephen Simmons. He was a sub that night, and Celtic were playing Juve in the Champions League. I think they won maybe 4-3, and someone shouted down at him that Celtic were winning, and he started smiling, and that did not please me at all, given that I was absolutely freezing my backside off. So yeah, that was definitely a memorable. I mean, another one to go along with that, there's quite a few shouts for people online which I'll get to, but I suppose one of the other ones would probably be the 1-0 defeat to Hibs in 2006.
Loved it.
When I think that featured on Craig Leach's positive side.
They literally had about 80% possession that night. I mean, we were absolutely honking.
It was the most one-sided 1-0.
Aye, I mean, Zaliukas was playing centre mid because he just joined us at the time, and that was seemingly his main position. Robbie Nielsen was like right midfield or something. It was some strange formation.
See, that's a night that I remember, because this is completely off topic and we will get back to the actual point of it, but I was going through a period in my life at that stage where I was utterly skint, so couldn't afford a ticket for the game, and I remember because it was just the worst night ever. It was a terrible watch, and it was one of those nights where you really, even though being at the game, you just really had to persuade yourself no to change the channel, because you could just change the channel and forget this game existed. And then I managed to, I was an 18-year-old who unfortunately had just had to have some orthodontistry done. Thankfully I was at the other side of the train tracks, and I managed to snap all my brace that night as well. So it was literally the thing of like, this is the worst football game I've ever seen in my life, and I've now just committed myself to hours of orthodontistry as a result of going mental here shouting at the telly. It was no the greatest night of my life, to be completely honest. Right, okay, so I think I'll do mine and then we'll go to the social media quickly. So I tried to be a bit creative. I remember, in terms of positives, Hearts put Celtic to the sword a couple of times in the late 2000, sort of 2007, 2009, I think maybe.
It was 2007 and 2009 actually.
Aye, one was a Michael Stewart penalty, I think, and the other was Andreas Velika, was it?
Aye.
Aye.
Double.
I remember those, but the two I went with, because they were just sort of, they were so perfect when you actually look at them in the way that they happened. So I went with two games against Dundee, one at Dens Park that I wasn't at because I was only like, I think I was only maybe 8 at the time.
At the 4-all game?
Yeah, but I remember listening on the radio, because it was one of those things when we've spoken about it before, when you're a kid and a game went to extra time, it was brilliant because you got to stay up past your bedtime, and it was on the radio. So I remember listening, and I remember it got to a point where Henry Smith took a penalty and thinking, this is brilliant, this is really cool, and he missed it. And
well, that was the thing, he'd actually saved one before that, and all we had to do was score one to go through, and for some reason Henry, it wasn't like it was sudden death with the penalties. We were literally in the first 5 penalties, and for some reason Henry decided he was taking one.
It was 5-4 on penalties.
He missed it, and then Dundee went on and scored. I think Vickers scored the winning penalty for them. But that was Henry Smith's last action as a Hearts goalkeeper. I think Nelson and Gary O'Connor got a run of games after, and then Rusey came in maybe about a month after that game. So it was for that quite a sad way for him to end up pretty much a 15 or 16
but
year
it
career.
was such a sort of weird period at the club. There was so much upheaval and stuff, and it was just sort of suitably mad but equally depressing.
I think very few of those players were still there a couple of months later.
Yeah, exactly. It got to the point where I think that Jim Jeffries has given a few interviews where he talks about the final straw, and it getting to the point where I think November and we were bottom of the league or second bottom of the league, and I had to just be like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. And quite a few guys got their boots and said their goodbyes at that point. And the second one, so that was the negative, losing on penalties, where your keeper missing the penalty, total farce. The second game, the positive game, was almost exactly a year later, 13 months later, at Easter Road against the same Dundee team, beating them 3-1 in the semi-final. That was that was a really positive time where I just made the Scottish Cup final, albeit being absolutely humped in the Scottish Cup final. But Jim Jeffries had built that squad. By that point we had seen the back of all those players. I think that was maybe Darren Beckford's debut in that game. Certainly he was new to the squad at that point.
I think it was more roughly to do with Pye, not debut for Pye, but I think he just came into the squad.
But there was
Beckford had been there a month or two as well.
But there was a few of those players who were on new, and there was this, like we say, some of the old guard had moved on, and even although some of these guys weren't necessarily world beaters, it had a freshness about it. Jeffries had an impact, and I remember just getting to that cup final in the follow up to what had happened in the Scottish Cup final. It felt different. It felt like, right, we've learned the lessons of May, and now this is going to be the end of that cup hoodoo that Hearts had at the time. Unfortunately, we all know it wasn't quite yet. We had to wait another year and a half or so, but I remember going to Easter Road and winning a cup tie that night, and it being a really positive thing. There's another cup semi-final that happened at Easter Road that I think would feature on a few people's worst League Cup.
Oh, I'm sure a couple of people mentioned it on Facebook.
You did mention
the Jamie McAllister. The Jamie McAllister semi-final, I think it should be.
It sort of paid his Heart's career entirely that. Right, Scott, what have we got on social media for this question? Then give us a quick roundup.
Yeah, so Michael Hansborough on Facebook, he went with his least favourite seeing Hibs lose a semi-final after extra time against Ayr United. I think, if I'm right in thinking, I'm pretty sure the likes of McGinley and John Hughes and that were playing for Ayr United that night. They had quite a strong sort of ex-Hibs contingent, Paul Withering maybe as well. His favourite was Keith Wright's winner against Rangers in the semi-final, the 91-92 season, before they put Dunfermline to the sword the following month. Let me just see who else mentions this. A few mentions for Motherwell, a couple of mentions for the Dundee game as well. So in terms of sort of worst ones, there was actually a really good mention on Twitter from Connor Preston, and it was with regards to the infamous Inverness semi. So not the first one, not the Michael and Goo semi-final, but the Paul McCallum.
I think
semi-final.
Sean mentioned the Michael and Goo one was his favourite because he said it's the only time he's seen Hearts win at Easter Road.
Yeah, and that's why I will be wanting his ticket ripped up before next Tuesday when he told me that stat.
I'll see what I can do.
No, the 2-2 game, we're 2-1 up against 9 men, injury time, and we're going to talk about game management later on tonight because that will feature heavily in both our games, but that was definitely a case that Hearts did not have a clue how to set up against 9 men.
No.
Inverness actually gave us the run around in that extra time, and it was quite embarrassing, if I can remember correctly. Probably the result that really did, that was the nail in the coffin, I think, for Gary Locke that year.
I was actually on this station at that time because we were doing an alternative show at the time, alternative music show, and so I couldn't be at the game because we had the show. So we were in here and we were watching it on BBC, and I remember it going, right, we're now leading and they're down to 9 men, and thinking, us actually saying, this is unbelievable, because actually in terms of cup finals, this is almost the most successful era that we've ever witnessed, despite the team going through administration and blah blah blah. And almost just as the words were out of our mouth, the sky caved in and Hearts managed to absolutely make a mess of that situation, because it is mad at that stage that in terms of reaching Hampden Cup finals, that would have been an incredibly successful period. That would have been the 3rd cup final in the space of a few years. It would basically have rivaled Jim Jeffries' run in sort of 96, 97, 98.
It's crazy, the whole mismanagement of the whole game. The fact that we signed a young kid for West Ham on the Friday evening who had never trained with the first team squad, yet when it came to penalties he was the first one taking a penalty, and I'm like, who's making these decisions?
Yeah.
Like, clearly no one. I remember Danny Wilson got a lot of abuse from me that day because as captain he literally wandered off the park when it came to the penalties, which I never think a captain should ever do, and he just sort of sat there and sulked and watched as the penalties were all missed. So yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've set the scene with enough League Cup madness there. I was going to say hopefully we didn't see any of that madness this weekend, but given the way the build-up will go and given how dismissed Hibs' chances will be in the lead-up, I think we probably actually hope we do see some of that madness, and we see Celtic, their domestic unbeaten run, come to a startling conclusion on Saturday. But with that, we will go a very quick break and we will come back to give you our analysis of Ross County 1, Hearts 2 and Hibernian 0, Aberdeen 1. Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire.
Music for Scotland. Radio Saltaire. Radio Saltaire. Radio Saltaire.
Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. Right, Scott, are you ready for some Hearts analysis?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's do it. The system. Let's start there. Because I notice I'll declare right now, didn't make it to Dingwall on Saturday, one of the few games I've missed this season thus far, so I was relying on BBC Alba for my coverage of the game, which, to be fair, good coverage, apart from the fact that it is confusing watching a game with essentially foreign commentary. But given that it's as live, surely they could have done something about the fact that they showed the Hearts team as, I think, a 3-4-1-2, with Randall left wing back, with Prince Buabin playing centre half, and so on and so forth. And then the game starts 30 seconds after they've shown that graphic, and it's very much 4 at the back. It's very much Prince Buabin in centre midfield. Were you surprised by the way they lined up, or did you expect what you got?
Yeah, I pretty much expected them to go flat back 4. I know that, you know, Prince has played that position on a sort of handful of occasions, but given what had happened in Dundee, and the fact that, you know, our midfield was very light, you know, Callaghan and Martin and that pulled up with some small injuries on Friday during that last training session, I felt that they were going to have to put Buabin in midfield just out of necessity more than anything else. So yeah, I mean, there seems to be a bit of a preference to go free at the back when they've got the tools to do so, but definitely they went with the right formation on Saturday. Okay,
right, let's move on for the system, because we'll sort of keep checking back on it as the game goes on, because there were quite a lot of changes for Craig Levein, enforced and otherwise, in this game. And let's go straight on then to the goal, because to be honest, the start of the game, it was a sort of decent game, and it was very, very competitive, but it was pretty scrappy at the same time. Neither team could really establish the style of football they wanted.
The first 20-25 minutes was played pretty much between the two ends of the 18-yard boxes. There was very little goal-mouth action. You know, Jamie Walker had a half-decent sort of snapshot for around sort of 20 yards after 20 minutes or so, but apart from that, there wasn't really a lot to note of. Hearts, after maybe, you know, surrendering possession first 5 minutes or so, started to come into the game more and played that way that a lot of teams do when they're away from home. You know, it's all about just winning those 50-50 battles and making sure that you're standing up to the opposition, and then when you've got an opportunity further on in the game, see if you can do anything when you have possession yourself. So it had the hallmarks of a very typical sort of Scottish Premiership sort of away performance, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, let's focus on the goal scorer for the first goal then, Isma Gonçalves. He is undoubtedly mercurial and can be at times incredibly frustrating, but he does continue to have a pretty good goal scoring record in the Premier League. What are your thoughts on him and the player he's developing into for Hearts?
Still a difficult one, you know. I think a lot of his problems and sort of flaws as a player all comes down to his decision making. I think in terms of sort of the raw ability to be a guy who could hit maybe 15 goals at least a season in this league, he's definitely got that, but it's all a case of sort of getting a bit of stability round about him as well. So I think sometimes we've been a bit harsh on players such as Gonçalves, where when you look at the fact that we were, you know, a bit of a basket case, you know, scenario those last 6 months of last season and then into the start of this year, it's definitely not been to his, you know, it has been to his detriment, I should say. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops over a settled season in that Hearts team, and whether we play two men up front enough for him and sort of Lafferty to click. Naturally, you would imagine those two will start the majority of the games at home over the next couple of months, so you might start to be able to gauge better where he's going to be at as a Hearts player come sort of Christmas time.
I thought there was the start of signs on Saturday that not necessarily Lafferty and Gonçalves as a pair, but Lafferty, Gonçalves and Walker as a three were starting to click. That first goal was, I thought, evidence of it. The fact that Walker got his head up and picked Gonçalves out. The fact that then when Gonçalves has the shot, you can see Lafferty's bust a gut to actually get up next to Walker at the back post in case Gonçalves drills it across the face. They're both there to finish. And actually, in fact, when you look at the celebration, the fact that I think Lafferty's embraced with Gonçalves on the deck for long enough that it started to become a bit questionable, to be honest, it's starting to show that as a three that they're starting to bond and actually understand the way each other plays a wee bit more. Would you agree with that?
I think so, although I do think that the formation change helps with that as well, because I think Jamie is given a bit more freedom within that setup. You know, when you've got like the likes of Cowie and Buabin and Cochrane Cowie kind of tends to just slot in and play almost like a narrow wide midfielder, but almost into a midfield three. So in that system, it allows Walker to get closer to his two front men, and that generally helps Goncalves and Lafferty. But they definitely do appear to be playing a bit closer to each other as well, because that's always been, I think, a lot of fans' main fear over Goncalves is the fact that he does like to run the channels and kind of almost cutting from left quite a lot. And Lafferty has also had a bit of a career spent not always being a main front man, but also playing as a bit of a wide man or wide target man. So it still needs a bit of work, but you could sort of see some of that, coming to fruition over the last sort of game or two.
Okay, the positive of Hearts' opening goal was followed up pretty quickly with a negative of Ross County's equalising goal. It was indeed a very quick reply. Would you put that down to individual error? Particularly, I'm thinking on the part of Conor Randall, who should have done better with the clearance into the stand for medals. I think should have been in his head at that point. Or is it evidence of the cardinal sin of the team switching off after scoring?
I think there's a bit of a mix of those two, alongside also a tingy bad luck on the fact that I think Michael Smith had just pulled up with a bit of an injury, and you could see that he wasn't quite able to sort of match. I can't mind if it was Gardyne or not. He
did actually have to leave the field, Michael Smith.
Yeah,
so just entered in again.
Exactly. So you could tell that obviously it was just, again, good on Ross County to obviously exploit that sort of weakness for that limited amount of time. And like you say, Randall should be clearing that, and I'm sure 9 times out of 10 he hits the stands with that clearance. But yeah, you could maybe say there's a bit of a lack of concentration there. But to be honest, that's normally a case where teams are pulled out of position. I don't think, you look at the shape of the team, the shape was right. It's just that when you take the injury into consideration, and also just poor technique for Randall there, it's probably more to do with that than rather the team as a whole falling asleep after going 1 goal up.
Okay, midfield looks like an area of a bit of chaos for Hearts at the moment.
It's going to be like the Marie Celeste. It's going to be like a ghost town in there, I think.
And that was sort of added to by the events, particularly in the latter part of the first half on Saturday. Without covering what actually caused that too much at the moment, because we'll probably look at that later, I think. The actual midfield position, improvisation worked on Saturday for Craig Levein. He was able to throw people in and sort of make the best of a bad situation. But is it concerning moving forward quite how many casualties there are in there at the moment?
It is, because if you look at not so much St Johnstone, but if you were to look past St Johnstone towards the Hibs game in a week's time, you look at where Hibs are probably their most fluid and their strongest. You would say it's that midfield sort of quartet that they play, and the fact that they kind of almost play like a five-a-side team, that Hibs quartet. There's not a case of them being in specialised positions. They all kind of, a lot of movement off the ball. Bartley tends to be the one that sort of does the covering, but you do look at that Hearts midfield just now and think there is the potential there for us to be very short in there. And I would have said that even if we had our first 11 out there, I would have said that was going to be a concern. So the fact that Juma's 75% likely to miss the game, you would think that Callaghan, I think, will be back. You've got Boab in there. Cowie's been in and out the team with sort of little niggly knocks. Shellac can play defensive mid, we've been told, but again, I doubt he's got the legs or the engine to be competing against the Hibs midfield.
Or the temperament, potentially.
Well, potentially that as well. And naturally, Randall will come back after he served his match suspension against St Johnstone. But for me, again, as he proved prior to getting sent off, I do feel that fullback is his best position. So I'd prefer to see him there, but it might be that we'll have to play him there out of necessity. So it's going to be an interesting one to focus on, because there isn't a lot of options there. Novak's just came back in to the under-20s team recently from an injury. They might decide that they need to maybe fit him in somewhere into centre midfield as well. So it could be an interesting team selection ahead of the next 2 or 3 games, I think.
Indeed, we'll cover that a little bit more in the preview of the St Johnstone game in our final section tonight. Right, we mentioned Conor Randall there. I've got his section titled here on the breakdown of the show as The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Now, normally when a player gets sent off, you would think that would be the ugly, but actually I think his clearance for the first goal was the ugly. His sending off probably qualifies as the bad. Just before we cover the sending off, going in sort of chronological order, the good part, he did play a big part in Hearts eventually their winning goal. that I thought was actually the first time I'd seen him playing in a central midfield role, influencing the game driving forward. We saw that a bit when he played right wing back at Murrayfield against Aberdeen, but in terms of influencing the game from the centre midfield, playing a couple of 1-2s and pulling the strings, we actually saw what he could bring there a wee bit. Were you surprised to see that from him on the edge of the opposition's 18-yard box?
Slightly. He showed one or two examples of that also when we were playing against Dundee a couple of weeks ago, where he plays Walker in quite cutely for a chance in the second half. So I think he does have that side to his game. I haven't seen enough of it yet to suggest that centre midfield. For me, centre midfield's only a position that he feels that he can play. I don't see a lot of evidence of that to suggest that that's his best position. But as I've said, it could be that lack of options could mean that he's thrown in there again after he served his suspension. But again, I thought at right back he played well. The only slight negative to him playing right back is I do feel that we sort of negate some of Michael Smith's qualities by playing him at left back, although I still feel that he had a solid enough match. But it's a bit of a shame that we couldn't maybe try and find somebody with a bit of a left foot out of the two. I mean, as far as I know, Randall's played left back for Liverpool, so I'm a bit surprised that we haven't tried him there, but obviously it's working for us the way that we're doing it just now.
Okay, so let's cover the sending off then. Talking about him in centre midfield, I think Conor Randall, one of the biggest positives of his game is his positional discipline. In that, like you say, no a great central midfielder, but he doesn't tend to get caught out of position too often. He seemed to lack a wee bit discipline in the more conventional sense at the weekend. How much fault would you put on him for the sending off?
I mean, the first booking on its own is not a bookable offence, but to be fair to Willie Collum, he does sort of highlight one or two other challenges prior to that, and one in particular that was quite heavy that probably could have merited a yellow card on its own. So I didn't have a lot to contend with, although as we've sort of discussed, was it even a foul? Potentially, you don't know, but I think we'll cut Willie Collum some slack with regards to that one. And to be fair, the second's also a bookable offence, so I don't really have any arguments with that.
Do you have an issue with Conor Randall for committing to what was it? Because they are sort of innocuous, and you think in some games they're shrugged off, but the second one does look like a silly challenge.
The second one more so because of the area of the park. You don't need to be leaving your foot in there,
and the ball's already away.
Yeah,
that is very much.
The team's got a good shape. You've just got you've just pulled in front again. You're away from home. 25 minutes to go roughly. And for me, that does lack a bit of it's a bit naive, that tackle. There's not a lot of malicious intent involved in it. It's just one of those daft ones where he puts his foot in, he leaves it in, and some referees might have given him the benefit of the doubt, but for me it's a bookable offence on its own, so I can understand why the referees decided to send him off. Okay,
on the subject of sendings off, literally in the space of 5 minutes prior to Conor Randall's second yellow card, there was a couple of shouts from the Ross County supporters at least for straight red cards, one for Isma Gonçalves and another for Kyle Lafferty. Now the Gonçalves one I think is it's a bit of frustration on his part, lunging in when he's just had a sort of similar lunge into him, although the Ross County player won the ball clearly, and Gonçalves sort of misses the ball entirely, although also misses the man. But the thing that makes you, I think, question after whether it should be a red is the fear in his face when he sees Colm go for the notebook, that it looks like Gonçalves thought he might have been about to see red. The Lafferty one, I think, is innocuous, but it's an elbow to the head. Was there panic on your part at any stage with either of those two that you thought a red card was coming? Having seen them back, do you think either merited a red card?
A bit of the panic on the Goncalves one, because Colm reacted to it very instantly, and sometimes when you see referees do that, you sometimes think that's never a good sign, especially when Willie Collum's concerned. The Lafferty one, for me, he's focusing on the ball, and that tends to be for me, so there's no intent there, although as you said, there is definitely contact with, I think, is it Davis?
I think it is.
Yeah. So I thought a yellow was justified in that one. I thought that yellow was probably just about justified with the Goncalves one, but it's one of those ones where when you watch the reaction of someone who's just lost the ball, you think to yourself, well, you can either take that as them just maybe being a bit overzealous trying to win it back, but then as their frustration led to them maybe lashing out. So again, it's all down to interpretation. I think Goncalves is the type of player that sometimes just switches off, and I think he's just trying to make a concerted effort to win the ball back, but it is definitely overzealous and at the very least deserves a yellow card. But I have seen red cards for them before.
See, every time I see something play out in that manner, I just always think of it as a Wayne Rooney effort. It's that thing of I think Goncalves gets tackled fairly, although he doesn't see the tackle coming, so I think he actually stays down on the ground for a minute, no because he's hurt, but I think because he's hacked off at himself for not seeing the man coming. The ball then hangs around in the area surrounding him for longer than he would expect, so as he's getting back up on his feet, he sees actually the boy who just tackled me has now got the ball right back at his feet, and he decides
previous for it as well. I think he done it against Dunfermline in the League Cup game. I remember him doing it over next to the main stand.
Yeah.
Well, the main stand that was getting built at the time, and I remember him kind of lashing out in the same way. So it's something that he needs to keep an eye on, because it is one of those ones where I have seen players get sent off for it. I wouldn't agree with that decision, but it wouldn't shock me to see someone sent off.
It's one of those things that's actually difficult as a supporter, because you quite like to see it. You didn't want to see a player give possession away and just surrender it and well, I'll just quietly jog back to my position. If he feels like someone's lunged in at him and he then gets the opportunity to do the same back, you want to see them dish that out a wee bit, but you have to do it in an intelligent way. And at times when you can see their heads steaming and they decide to just lunge in, it makes it so obvious for the referee that it's a decision there to be made and that it's like he's lost the rag, even if it is quite a calculated challenge to make. I think you're right, Goncalves has to beware on that front. Right, in terms of after the sending off had happened, I think most Jambos got a little bit of a sort of pang of, we've been here before, a wee bit of flashback maybe to Hamilton, where Willie Collum was referee when he sent Callum Patterson off, and numerous other collapses with 10 men. It's a different Hearts team just now, but one of the big differences there were a couple of youngsters in there, and when we say youngsters we mean guys who have played less than 10 first team appearances, Jamie Brandon being one of those. Ewan Henderson, I think, even significantly less appearances than that.
That was only his second appearance after a sub appearance against Celtic last season.
Now they were obviously introduced to a game at half time that was 1-1, and potentially I believe Craig Levein would have been sending them out there to get on the front foot and play some football, and obviously the task that they've been given changes dramatically when Hearts go down to 10 men. How impressed were you with them and the ability that they showed to step up to that challenge?
Impressed even more with the last 25 minutes of the game, where we managed to see the game out actually, fairly comfortably. Ross County had maybe one really telling chance in that whole spell, but I felt the way we kept the ball, the way that Walker and Lafferty sort of moved back in to make it almost a midfield five after the sending off was really telling. It was really encouraging to see. It was like a 4-4-1 with Henderson playing pretty much up top on his own, and he wasn't so much that he made the ball stick. He just managed to get decent enough service to make sure that he was running the ball in the channels, try and win throw-ins, down the park, play a bit of percentage football, which is all you need to do when you're 2-1 up with 10 men. So it was encouraging to see. I mean, we're going to have to rely a lot on our youth players, because clearly the strategy, as far as I can see it, in terms of our recruitment, tends to be now, I mean, given how we've been able to bring in players such as Berra and Lafferty, and then also given the reported wages offer to Jamie Walker during the summer, it would seem as if we're now pinpointing a very strong opening 11, experienced, one or two coups, guys who have maybe got a bit of international experience, and maybe pushing the boat out a bit and spending a little bit more on those types of players, but then filtering through a lot of the youth guys into the actual subs bench and seeing a lot of the under 20s and under 19 players playing there. So it's going to be vital for these guys to almost kind of step on and become men, maybe even a bit quicker than sometimes the club would want. Harry Cochrane's a great example. He actually had a pretty decent first half, and although there's all that, not physical, but there is basically that another couple of sort of growth spurts that's probably required on his behalf in terms of sort of developing that sort of upper body strength. In terms of how he looks for the ball constantly and his actual technical ability on it, he'll certainly be a mainstay, I think, for whatever club that might be. Where it's for us, you never know with these things, but he definitely looks a player.
Right, I did want to touch on Cochrane while we were talking about questionable decisions or possible red cards and youngsters stepping up. What were your thoughts on Curran versus Cochrane and the bloody sock debacle?
It's just an accident, really. I don't think he means it.
Does that matter though? Because the thing that jumped out to me was that you look at a lot of these scenarios now, and we as fans always tend to go into these, whether we're neutrals or whether it's the team we support, and we tend to fixate on whether they won the ball or not. But it seems that we've seen a few examples recently where it actually doesn't matter to a lot of referees anymore whether you won the ball. It's about endangering your opponent, and even if you win the ball cleanly in a fair tackle, if that leads to you making contact with your opponent in a way that endangers their safety, actually that can still be a red, even though the tackle itself was
fine.
The
classification of the ruling more tends to lean to that. But in obviously you want to try and see the game refereed as closely to the book as possible, but you do want a little bit of common sense applied to it. And when you see a tackle like Curran's, you do see that endangering your fellow professional. But then for me, there should be the intent. You need to see that there's malice intent on top of that for it to be a red card. That would be my interpretation of that specific law. And I would like to think that although there is that law in place, they do ask the referees to try and interpret that the way that they want to. So you'll get some referees who will go over the top and maybe flash out cards for those types of challenges. For me, I don't see the intent, although that you can clearly see the players had to come off at half time, so it's not great on his part. But I wouldn't go sending a player off for that.
Because it was sort of noticeable that nothing was given at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, would
you have given anything?
Clearly, it's a foul. Clearly, it's a foul. But I wouldn't probably go too much further than that.
Okay. In terms of Harry Cochrane, just before we move on and sort of round up the game, he is a player who, as you mentioned, has been singled out as looking particularly slight, being particularly young, in that he's barely 16 and he is a bit of a beanpole, and he plays right in the centre midfield, which in a lot of games in the Scottish Premiership, that's where the physical battle happens. That's where Jim Goodwin and guys like that operate, Darian McKinnon, who really are there just to intimidate and to win the scraps and get in there. I thought there was one in the first half when he sort of got a bit of an arm in the back where he looked a bit weak and young, and you thought actually most Premiership players wouldn't go down there, but that one I thought actually it was impressive with how quickly he got on his feet. There were a couple of times it seemed like people were telling him to go down, and then he realised the game was still going on around him regardless, so he got up and he tried to hustle as best as possible, tried to take a touch at one point and realised he just couldn't take a touch of the ball. And I think when you got the close-up of his ankle and you saw quite how much blood there was there, it made perfect sense. Do you think he earned a lot of plus marks with the supporters just for sort of manning up, for want of a better phrase, and actually seeing out the last couple of minutes there with his ankle in the state it was?
Yeah, possibly. And I think in terms of what we'll discuss maybe over the coming months with players like Cochrane and Henderson, it's going to be really vital for the experienced players round about them, maybe trying to take a little bit of that burden off them with regards to the physicality of the game until they step up. So in terms of our midfield just now, that's why it's vital that I think Callaghan especially needs to be, and it's difficult because you almost look at Callaghan and Cochrane and say it probably wouldn't work as a midfield two, but maybe as part of a midfield three with maybe Cowie or Doom in there alongside them, that would potentially fit for this current Hearts team. So it's vital that these guys help them, and I've seen a lot of that. There's a lot of blabbing helping Cochrane throughout that game, and also against Dundee as well. So it'll be interesting to see how his game comes on with regards to that. But like you say, I thought he actually was coming on to a decent game again, like he sort of done against Dundee. Obviously started off fairly quiet, started to come more and more into the game. You can still see that he's maybe not quite there in terms of playing 90 minutes at that level, but yeah, definite positive.
Okay, the back two were singled out for praise by Craig Levein. Christophe Berra, I think we can just sort of assume on a weekly basis that you're going to get the same Christophe Berra week in, week out now, and he is at a standard that is very, very good for the league that Hearts are playing in. How much has John Souttar improved next to him already?
And I need to see it over a 6-month spell. I feel like we have this conversation about John Souttar, and he's now been at the club, a couple of months shy, 2 years, and I feel like there has been little 3 or 4 match spells where I have seen that physicality and seen him winning the aerial duels and looking good, and then all it seems to take is one game where he just looks out his depth again. So for me, I saw a great performance out of him at the weekend, but I need to start seeing that now over a full 6-month spell before I feel like he's definitely moved up a notch from where I thought he was as a centre half. But definitely had a great game. Playing alongside Berra and again, to be fair to John Souttar, he has been part of a lot of makeshift defences during those 2 years. It'll be interesting to see how he comes along, if they can keep those two fit and keep them settled as part of a back 4 or 5 throughout the year.
Okay, staying on the defence as we wrap up, the big focus of the Dundee game, of course, was set pieces. The fact that Hearts essentially chucked away a decent away result, either a win or a draw, whichever way you choose to look at it, by horrendous defending at set pieces. I thought the style of Hearts defending was noticeably different at set pieces at the weekend, and a lot more. If you want to be pleasant, you can call it robust. If you want to be negative, or look at the other side, you can call it physical and potentially a wee bit dangerous. For you, is it playing the game? Is it intelligent and tackling the issues that were there, or is it walking a bit of a tightrope in terms of how hands-on Hearts were at certain points?
It's funny because it did actually get highlighted in the sports scene package. I think because there was the lack of proper football highlights, I think they decided to focus on a few of the sort of refereeing decisions and that Owen Coyle had highlighted in his post-match conference interview. But I watched Christophe Berra, and you know he does it. He does it week in, week out, and it is pretty similar to how the Italians tend to do their sort of man marking at set plays. And it is all about gameplay with them, and they do get away with it. And I watch someone like Berra, and I think if that was Zaliukas, he'd probably get penalties given against him. And for me, refereeing is almost like 80-90% knowing the rules and applying those rules, and the other 10% is there's a little bit of a subconscious element to being a referee, because you're human at the end of the day. And for me, I think that the way that Christophe Berra handles himself, similar to what Stephen Presley done as Hearts captain, is I think he gains the respect of the referees, and sometimes that does get you that extra inch on the park.
He is also, I would say, I agree with that to an extent, and it's what you see with Scott Brown every week. But I also think there's an element with Berra, whereas if you look at Zaliukas, or if you look at what Scuttle used to do for Liverpool, they were a bit sort of chaotic with how they did it. It was a bit too obvious. It was a wee bit, it didn't look very professional. Whereas Berra, it's much less him pulling or pushing, and it's very just, he sort of just holds the guy. He just vacuums him in, and the guy can't get out. And to be fair, it's not that obvious unless you're looking for it, because there's not flailing arms, there's no guys flying over. It's just they sort of get in a bit of a hold, and then now and again they both fall over.
Well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens now, because it's now been given a little bit of sort of spotlight on that sports scene programme, so you would wonder how that might get looked upon over the next sort of 2 or 3 games. So that might be something that he needs to be aware of. But I thought we defended really well at set plays, and Ross County, they're no slouches when it comes to that. That's a big part of their game. So that was definitely a plus point, especially given if you look at how many goals we've lost for set plays against St Johnstone over the last 2 or 3 years since we've came back up from the Championship. That has been a weak point. So hopefully we've managed to just in time to get that side of our game down and improve on that before St Johnstone come round on Saturday.
Okay, final quick Hearts point before we move on to that preview of the St Johnstone fixture later on. How important was it psychologically to hold on to the 3 points heading into the next few fixtures?
It just kept us within that touching distance of the sort of bottom end of the top 6. So just now it's all about looking at who's directly above you, and just now it just so happens to be Hibs. I'm not a massive fan of always kind of thinking we need to be above Hibs, you just look at who's above you directly just now, given the amount of away games we've had. Just now Hibs are a point above us. Hibs are playing their League Cup game at the weekend, so there is an opportunity there for us to rise into the top half of the 6, just by knowing that as long as we do our part of the bargain, we will be in the top 6 come sort of Saturday evening. So it was good from that sort of psychological standpoint. It's all about a bit of belief, because really, there was something else that was touched on in the sports team programme. I hadn't really given it much thought, but if you look at the sort of narratives that Hibs and Hearts have been given this season, Hibs have been, rightly praised at times for the fact that they play good free-flowing football, but the fact of the matter remains there's a point between those two sides just now after the first 9 games. So we're not as far off where we want to be as what we maybe have been thinking. Like, say at the end of the Dundee game, you walk out there and the immediate concern is, a point dropped, or you look at the Partick game where you had chances there and you think there's another point or two dropped. So I think it was very positive, and psychologically, in terms of sort of looking at who we need to try and catch now, it's good to know that we're 4 or 5 points ahead of 8th, but only a point off 6th. So we're closer to that top 6 than we are getting sucked into the bottom, where, when you look at the fixtures we had at the start of the year, who'd have thought that we would have got 3 wins and 3 draws out our first 9 games?
Okay, all good points, I think. Right, we're going to go to a very quick break, but definitely stay tuned with us to hear Mark Smith rant about Hibernian 0, Aberdeen 1. Are you ready, Mark?
Aye.
Right, I'm giving you a minute and a half to get all your thoughts in order, and then I'm going to just wind you up and let you go. Right, thank you very much for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire.
Music for Scotland. Radio Saltaire. Radio Saltaire. Radio Saltaire.
Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. Right, Mark, let's cover this Hibs game. Now, we'll start where we did with Hearts, with the system. I've seen some suggestion that Neil Lennon got the shape wrong after the fact. In your opinion, is that hindsight being an exact science, or is it a fair comment?
I think it was a fair comment. Aberdeen were a well organised outfit, so you could question, I guess, his intent setting up with one up front. You had Boyle out wide, Slivka, on the other side. You had a midfield of Bartley, McGeoch and McGinn, a solid back four. One of the things that I noticed very early on, if you were going to get in behind Aberdeen, was use of wingers, and I felt Boyle, it was almost like we were very one-sided. A lot of the attacking play was coming from Boyle on the right with Whittaker overlapping, but we really stretched on the left-hand side. I felt that we missed a second winger down the left-hand side, in my opinion.
Okay, essentially to give a bit balance to the side, do you think? Yeah,
definitely. I thought Stevenson had committed in several occasions, and McGinn and McGeoch had made committing runs, but I just felt the midfield was disjointed. Aberdeen were really well organised. They had a kind of central holding midfielder similar to Bartley, just playing in behind. Just playing in front of the back four. And then it was very hard, to break down when Hibs were on the ball, to break down the Aberdeen midfield. They just had pace with Logan and Mackay-Steven. They had pace with, Shinnie was, phenomenal for them. He was lucky that he wasn't sent off, to be honest, in my opinion. That probably would have changed the game. But I just felt Hibs in the final third going forward on Saturday just didn't have the same depth and quality. And actually, I'm picking up on Scott's point that he's said over the past couple of weeks that he's a little bit worried about Hibs in the final third.
No. I'm not worried. Let's just take that one out here. I'm not worried.
I think the midfield performed well, but they just felt a bit disjointed.
I think, generally speaking, it was a pretty even start to the game, but even in the early stages, Aberdeen seemed to show a wee bit more of an ability to cut the Hibs defence open than Hibs seemed to have at the other end. Would you attribute that to quality on their part or defensive issues on the Hibs side?
Be honest, the defence is shaky at the minute. We've seen how many goals we've conceded for the start of the season so far. You could possibly attribute it to the step up in league yet again, the quality of the opposition. The Aberdeen team that we were playing against on Saturday were very well organised. They were very fit. They were extremely physical. which gave a very difficult game for Steve McLean to referee, and there was a lot of inconsistencies in my opinion. Aberdeen were a good yard fitter in several positions than what we were, and they stretched us defensively. They stretched their midfield. I mean, if you look at the opening goal, Hibs were a little bit clueless in midfield, in my opinion. I was a little bit dumbfounded just how close McGeoch and McGinn were to each other. Stokes up front on his own, he dropped back quite considerably, and then we had three players commit to the ball. When you look back, McGinn, McGeoch and Stokes all going to the ball. As soon as they've got play up and running, they've committed the ball forward, and then Bartley, he was running back in space, not picking up a man, not committing to the ball, and that then in turn meant Paul Hanlon had to commit from the straight back 4 20 yards forward, which just left a whole gulf of space. Mackay Stevens got a yard on Stevenson, and before you know it, straight ball through, and he's in on goal. And I just felt defensively Hibs were naive. There was quite a few decisions that were poorly made by the players in certain positions. It doesn't need three of them to close down the ball, and especially when we're that stretched in midfield anyway. Getting both of our central midfielders in that respect, both McGinn and McGeoch committing to the ball, it then left over 40 yards of space for Aberdeen then to play the ball through. So
is the real concern there, based on what you're saying and the way you're describing the events that led up to the goal, the real concern sounds like it is that it can't even just be attributed to one individual, that it's essentially a sort of systematic issue, that the positional sense of the players and the pressure they feel they're required to put on the ball actually leads to the defence being opened up before Aberdeen even really do anything with it. Is that the big concern, that it's not a case of Lennon sitting down and saying, for example, to Hanlon, don't wander 20 yards out of position, because if he doesn't go, then in theory there's space just in a different area of the pitch because of the way that Hibs were utilising the press there?
Yeah, that's a valid point. I think communication is key in those situations, and maybe that's a little bit of naivety in McGinn. McGeoch and Stokes were in perfect positions there to stretch. There was no reason for McGinn to commit to come to the ball. But where's the communication from McGeoch just to say stay in the man, stay in the centre? Because as soon as the ball got away, it was then distributed through to I'm trying to mind the guy's name from Aberdeen. I think it was is it Arnason, how you pronounce it?
Carrie Arnason, yeah.
Yeah, Arnason. It was then touched on by Stephen May. If McGinn hadn't committed to the ball, he would have been in a far better position to possibly break up that play. If Bartley was more alert in terms of play shifting from the left side of the pitch to the right and actually started to track across, he could have closed down the gap that Stevie May was running into to distribute the ball to Mackay Stevens, who had managed to get round the back of Stevenson. But likewise, Hanlon wouldn't have been out of position because he's had to then come and commit to May, which has then left the gap for Mackay Stevens to get round the back of Stevenson. So I just think the whole thing was just a little bit disjointed in leading up to the opening goal. If there was a lot more communication with the players and a better read, arguably from Bartley to I guess move further across play, he wouldn't have put as much pressure on Hanlon to commit. You could have argued that actually, why did Hanlon commit? Come in off the back 4.
Yeah, because the only way that passes up is a goer is by Hanlon committing and then Stevenson ball watching as well. So
yeah,
as much as it's the midfield's problem, you also have to question the two defenders in that.
That's why I raised the point before, because there's a question about where is the space most likely to hurt you. Yeah. So yet Hanlon can not go and leave 20 yards of space in front of him. And of course, if the boy then picks the ball up, strides 10 yards and scores a worldie from 30 yards, then Hamlin can hammer his midfield.
Yeah.
It is that's what concerned me a wee bit listening to your description of it, Mark, in terms of how it played out in your eyes, is that at that stage it's quite difficult to solve defensive issues if it literally is you shouldn't have done that, but then equally you shouldn't have reacted in that way and you should have stayed where you are. It actually sounds like you're pointing the finger of blame at quite a few players, which makes it a wee bit more difficult to just fix it for Saturday, if you see what I mean.
But maybe that's what Lennon touched upon earlier in the season in one of his post-match interviews, that there was no leaders out there. And maybe I'm backtracking on a point that I made, that maybe I felt we had too many leaders, because you had Whittaker, you had Gray, you had Hanlon, you got McGinn. All of them have wore the captain armband, but sometimes it just needs someone to take control and actually communicate better. Players, a little bit more. Some of the players having a little bit more foresight and vision of where play's moving, and actually they don't always need to commit, just because. And that's one of the things that Hibs done a lot on Saturday. And it's great. I'm not saying don't put pressure on players. Try and bake up play and getting tackles in, and because absolutely. But I think the way that the team was set up, the players that were committing a lot of the time was McGeoch and McGinn, and that just our shape wasn't there in the centre of the park for controlling the game, especially when Aberdeen had a good solid 4-5 players in the centre midfield. Okay,
this is a question that I purely want to know the answer to myself, because I'm interested by your thoughts on it. We've mentioned at numerous points this season the phenomenon of Hibs falling behind in games, and it seems on the face of it an annoyance here, because Hibs had such momentum from that unexpected point at Celtic Park that it was frustrating to go behind this early and have to come back again. However, knowing that is indeed what had happened at Celtic Park, going behind early and coming back to get a draw with the champions there, what was the feeling like in the stadium? Was it a feeling of, oh, here we go again, falling behind early, or was there a defiance of, well, if anyone's qualified to come back for this, it's us?
Aye. Well, I think there definitely was the expectation that Hibs would score. Stokes, he's the leading goal scorer. Hibs were scoring goals for fun at the start of the season. We went to Celtic Park, we've scored 2 goals. Went to Ibrox, we scored 3 goals. We're in a position that we've clearly got people who can put the ball in the back of the net. And not only that, as I touched upon the other week there, we've got when you look at all our goal scorers, we've got goals in every area of the park: defence, midfield, and going forward. It does concern me. I'll start to agree with Scott that since I think it was the St Johnstone's game, that we've had 4 or 5 games now whereby we haven't had a centre forward or one of our wingers on the score sheet, and that is a little bit concerning. I felt Aberdeen were very strong in terms of closing and breaking up play. They were very well organised, and there were times where you kind of thought, if we get an early goal back here, but they were so well organised that Hibs just didn't manage to break them down well enough. Aberdeen read their plays very well. Their off the ball movement, it limited the options that Hibs had in going forward. And I think the frustration inside the crowd was Lennon didn't mix it up early enough.
Okay.
He made the substitutions.
Yeah, we're going to come on to that definitely. But so before we focus on the attack, because I think we need to spend a bit of time analysing that, I want to touch on the midfield a wee bit, because I noticed a little bit of feedback from Hibs fans saying that there was a bit of frustration, I think particularly in the first half, that they felt like McGeoch and McGinn were being utilised essentially incorrectly in their eyes, because they felt that McGeoch was finding themselves in attacking positions that they would have preferred to see McGinn in, and vice versa. McGinn was playing in front of the back four and dictating tempo where they'd rather see McGeoch doing that role. Did you feel that at all, that they could have swapped at points and been more effective?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm still the jury's still out with me on Slivka. Moving away from McGinn and McGeoch just for a second, coming to the starting lineup again, you had Boyle on the right, who played exceptionally well. I would have preferred to have maybe started Danny Swanson over on the left. That may have given us more options going forward. You had Bartley. I think the starting lineup was almost like a 4-2-3-1 formation, which McGeoch did get into positions that you're thinking you're 30-40 yards out of position. Why are you there? Likewise, McGinn was the same. The midfield for me just didn't gel. They didn't connect, didn't communicate. They were stretched. Aberdeen were on top of them a lot of the time. Don't get me wrong, John McGinn's pace and his ability to drive at players caused a lot of problems. He was literally hacked on several occasions. Shinnie got booked, as a consequence of one of those. And so he was causing the Aberdeen players frustration. You could see that. McGeoch for me is better slightly deeper, where he can just get a ball and distribute a pass. And for me, that those options were limited. And the reason why they were limited was because of the fact that I think Slivka was playing out of position. I think we could have had a better option than Slivka starting. McGinn was given the freedom to run, but just with the number of players, quality players that Aberdeen had in the centre of the park, he was a lot of the time, closed down. And Aberdeen were a big physical team. They were getting in at the players. They were, scrapping with them a lot of the time. And McGinn didn't have a lot of time on the ball. Aberdeen came and they obviously had a game plan to frustrate, get close, leave the foot in after challenges and hope that Stephen McLean doesn't see them. And they did play a little bit dirty. And it worked well.
Okay, we'll touch on that a wee bit more in a bit as well. Right, you mentioned the attacking intent, at least earlier, and the fact that Neil Lennon made 3 changes which were all designed, in theory at least, to create goals. A goal obviously that was desperately required, being 1-0 down at the point he made the changes. Is it encouraging to see Neil Lennon take that mentality and go all out in terms of attacking changes, or is it more concerning that changes that were made and designed entirely to create a goal failed in that end result?
I think the frustration for me was it was clearly not working. He took to the 65th or 67th minute or whatever it was to make the first initial substitution. And sometimes in games you want to see impact. If you're going to change up formation and you're going to go for it and you're going to bring on a couple of players, then maybe just take the stance of, okay, I'll put 2, maybe 3 on all at once. Certainly 2. He put Barker on, and as soon as Barker came on, he had a bit of an engine. He was starting to drive, but because we didn't have another winger on the left hand side, Slivka just it didn't work for me. With Slivka on Saturday, I don't know why. Just watching his play on the ball, off the ball, it just didn't work. You then look at when he brought Swanson on, and that's when Hibs actually looked like they had options on both sides of the park. There were several times when Swanson drove at the Aberdeen defence, got in behind their full-backs and started to distribute balls across the box. But one of the things that really frustrated me was the lack of presence inside the box when Hibs did get into good positions. Right at the end of the game, Swanson got himself in a fantastic position, got down to the byline, cut it back, and I remember saying to my father-in-law when I'm at the game, I was like, where is everybody? Because we had literally about 6 players that were hanging about, between the 12 to the 18 yard box. Not one player was there, kind of following that run in to get on the end of the pass. I don't know where they were expecting Swanson to put the ball.
Well, in that scenario, I think Swanson has to resort to sort of drilling it and hoping it goes off an Aberdeen defender in, really. Those are sort of his only targets in his path.
Well, I know the listeners can't see this, but I was saying to Scott before the game, so what I done is I actually took a screenshot off the BBC's highlights of exactly where the players were distributed. Now, Scott's sitting next to me and he can see Swanson's on the byline, right, and he's cut the ball back. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Aberdeen players within the 6 yard box, 5 of which are actually swarming around Swanson. Okay, there what appears to be Effie Ambrose on the 6-yard box, but there's 4 Hibs players, 5 Hibs players out with the penalty spot. And it's like, there was just no anticipation in my eyes for, going forward. There seemed to be a lack of confidence on Saturday.
Could I be cheeky and say that maybe they weren't expecting the ball back for their teammate?
He is on the byline, to be fair.
No, I'm highlighting the point that once he's got round one player, they're like, yep, he's definitely going to try and do this on his own, and maybe they've just thought, I'm just putting that out there.
No, that's a good point. But at the same time, I think, in the final third, Hibs were poor on Saturday. One of the other real bugbears of mine was the amount of time that Hibs had on the ball in a set-piece position. So if Aberdeen had committed a foul, which there was quite a few of them on Saturday, I'm all for keeping momentum going during the game. Getting the ball down straight away and then just passing off and getting yourself in a position where you may be catching them unawares, attacking, counter-attacking. There was numerous occasions where we were within 35, 40 yards of goal, and the whistles went for a free kick. And all of a sudden, and it was the same from corners, etc., short corners, McGinn, McGeoch standing over the ball. Next thing you know, McGinn's put it down, touched it and kicked it 3 yards to the right to McGeoch. There was instances throughout the match from a set-piece perspective where we had committed centre-halves, from our box all the way down. They're expecting delivery, and then this play was just broken up on so many occasions because Aberdeen players were fit. They were pressing hard on Hibs, and they were getting in amongst it. You're then leaving yourself in a position defensively where you've got centre halves, and because you've got Bartley, you've got Ambrose, you've got Hanlon, and they're in the box. You know what I mean? They've then got 100 yards to run to get back, and with the pace of players like Gary Mackay-Steven, the pace of Logan, he was phenomenal for Aberdeen on Saturday, in my opinion. These guys could get the ball and then they could distribute passes because they've got the quality and they're going to punish you. And we're not playing at Championship League level anymore, and I just felt there was a lot of naivety in a lot of the set piece plays. Hibs didn't capitalise in a lot of respects for me when it came to set pieces and attacking on Saturday.
Okay, just to give you a break from your frustration for a second, I'm going to ask you not to give us your fans' opinion for the next question, but I'm going to ask you to assume the mentality, assume the person of a Hibs player, and tell me what they were thinking on Saturday. What does Simon Murray think on Saturday when eventually his number comes up with 5 minutes to go in the game, and rather than going on to partner Anthony Stokes, he goes on to play up front on his own when Hibs are desperate for a goal? Is frustration starting to set in with him that he's not being given a fair crack of the whip in games to go out and make an impact?
Well, I would stumped on that one.
I assume, well, if you're Simon Murray, you started the season scoring the goals, and in theory, in that position, wants his manager to come to him and say, right, Simon, you're the guy that's going on, you're going to get me the equaliser here, or you're going to get me back in the game, and his number doesn't come up till 5 minutes to go, and even then it's no that they're all. I saw a lot of frustration that if you're going to put Murray on with 5 minutes to go, you've left it that late already, put him on next to Stokes, then he put him on in place of Stokes, because then actually what have you really changed there? How do you think that he is feeling in terms of only getting 5 minutes in a big game like that, and how are you as a supporter feeling about the fact that Simon Murray's star seems to have waned a fair bit and Neil Lennon actually seems to be taking him out of the spotlight quite a bit at the moment?
Yeah, I think Murray will be frustrated. There's no doubt about that. Any footballer wants to play, and they want, especially in a centre forward position, to get the opportunity to score goals. I don't think that'd be causing any unrest, but there is a bit of a concern now that we've had 5 or 6 games where we haven't had Stokes, hit the back of the net, and likewise with Murray. I think the last time that everybody was on form hitting the back of the net was against Livingston, the 3-2 cup tie. So I think there will be a little bit of frustration from Simon Murray, and his off the ball work rate. I was actually really surprised at Stokes' off the ball work rate on Saturday. I thought he put in an excellent shift, just closing down the Aberdeen centre halves, and ultimately Murray's going to be frustrated.
Do you see it changing anytime soon in terms of his impact? If Hibs continue to struggle in front of goal, does Lennon have to pull the trigger and go with Murray again from the start and try and be a little bit more outright attacking in that sense?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Lennon's still yet to find his best formation with his best players. When we're playing against top quality opposition, they are coming, to Easter Road, or we're going away from home, and we are still trying to find consistency. So I think there's definitely room for improvement in the final third. Okay,
quick fire then. To stay on that for one more question, Neil Lennon drew attention to the fact that there was only 3 shots on target, despite Hibs' continuous sort of presence within the game and their numerous efforts on goal. Why? Why was there only 3 shots on target? What do you attribute that to?
I think Aberdeen had closed Hibs down on numerous occasions. They were tight in a lot of the attacks moving forward. We had a mixture of long balls. McGeoch distributed well to Boyle a lot of the time, and I think from that perspective, Logan had him in his back pocket a lot of the game. He was excellent in terms of just shielding the ball, just standing shoulder to shoulder with Boyle. And I think Boyle would have found that tough at the weekend. That was his probably first real test, because he's shone head and shoulders for me this season, and got himself into some fantastic positions against the other opposition. Stokes was a little bit lonely up front, in my opinion, on Saturday. The distribution didn't really come from Slivka, McGeoch. They were playing quite freely in midfield, but a lot of the time the Aberdeen midfield closed down, broke up play. So distribution wise, you've got to give credit to Aberdeen. They played very well on Saturday, came with a game plan, it worked. I just felt that Hibs certainly had the drive with McGinn, but the end game wasn't there.
Okay, there's no doubt that there seems to be a sort of general consensus that Aberdeen were very robust in the way that they played the game. Given that it got them the result, obviously it's difficult sometimes to take from the perspective of the opposition, as you were on Saturday, but given it got them the result, do you look at it as intelligent gamesmanship, or do you think they were lucky to get away with it, and with a different referee it might have been a completely different game?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to be too overcritical of Hibs' performance. On the whole, they defended well. Decision making in the final third, not too sure about the lineup. Could we have had possibly a change of formation and bringing on 2 substitutions for a bit of impact slightly out of them when it did happen? That may have changed it up. You never know, we might have got a different result, but I think on the whole it was a very good performance from Hibs, and I think we were unlucky not to get a point. We deserved probably something from the game, but
in terms of Aberdeen's physicality, what do you think they overstepped the mark? Do you think they were lucky? How did you view that at the time? Because I know a lot of people thought they came with a sense of breaking up the game and making sort of sportsman-like fouls, in terms of intelligent fouls, not necessarily in terms of the actual challenge, but when they made the challenge and when they gave away fouls rather than let Hibs play flow. What were your thoughts on that? Did you think that they overstepped the mark?
They're a physical team. Football's a contact sport. I felt Steve McLean was inconsistent with a lot of the decisions that he was making. We had Stevenson and McGinn booked for, arguably cautionable offences, but there was, Aberdeen players that were persistently fouling, that weren't being cautioned. They were just being given a talking to by Stephen McLean and saying, wait a minute, enough's enough, no more. A few minutes later, they'd be in a position where they've committed a foul, and then they're, arguably a cautionable foul, and they're not in a position where they're getting booked. So I think there was a few really obvious cautionable offences that Aberdeen had committed, and Stephen McLean did issue a card, but had he issued the cards earlier in the game, then, especially for players like Shinnie, they'd be in a position that they're then, not in a... They're more fearful going into challenges, if that makes sense. And that then, it puts them a little bit more in the back foot, because they know that they could get sent off. And that may have potentially have then given Hibs more of an onus, to commit and drive. Certainly from more of a direct approach through the centre midfield.
Okay, moving on from Saturday's game a little bit as we round up on that then, to the home record in general. That's 4 points from a possible 12 now. Lost the last 2, yet unbeaten on the road, including that unbelievable result against Celtic at Celtic Park. Why is it? Why is that? Is it just fortune, or is there an issue with how Hibs play or how the opposition approach the games at Easter Road?
Coming back to the start of the season, Neil Lennon said we're going to finish second, and I don't know if that just drives every single team to come and think, right, Hibs are a scalp this season, let's prove them wrong, that they're not just in a position that they're going to waltz back into the Premier League and then finish second.
To be fair, I don't know if he did say they'd finish second, but he did say towards the end of last season that he thought they potentially had the second best squad.
Second best squad, yeah. Which indirectly could be interpreted of saying,
yes,
I think we could finish second. So yes, he didn't say those words directly, but that was what he was insinuating, in my opinion.
Okay.
Others may interpret that differently.
Yeah.
For me, that's put Hibs kind of on the back foot. That puts expectation on the players, which rightfully there should be. They're probably getting paid a lot of money, and they're all talented footballers, and they've all proven themselves at a high level historically. So there should be expectation coming in. We're now selling out week in, week out, or close to selling out Easter Road week in, week out. We've got record season tickets sold this year. We're up over 13,000, which is all fantastic for the club. It's shown progress. It's shown commitment from the board in terms of the way that they're driving the club forward. So reflecting on some of the results, we've had arguably some poor results at home. John McGinn, publicly came out throughout the week there and said that we need to improve our home form. We've taken 1 point from the past 3 games, losing to Aberdeen and Hamilton, and their frustration is definitely showing through. Possibly come January, we might have the opportunity to bring in another centre forward. That might get a little bit more of a competitive edge. But touching on the point that we just spoke about, it would be nice to see Simon Murray get his head in, but I don't know. Stokes, as I've said in previous shows, has got that bit of class about him that from nothing can score a goal.
Yeah.
And I think Lennon's waiting for that. He is the league's top scorer, so he still has to put faith in him, because I think that's what he's came to Easter Road is to play, and to play week in, week out.
Yeah, I should clarify that stat I gave there. It's not lost the last 2. The Motherwell game just felt like a defeat because it was a comeback from where it was. It's lost 2 of the last 3, but with that sort of bit of a collapse against Motherwell in there as well. Scott,
I'm just going to offer something with regards to the contrasting sort of results between sort of home and away form just now for Hibs. For me, it's all down to direct play and just being able to mix it up. And naturally, I would assume that Big Davy was injured at the weekend, but you would like to think that if he'd been an option on the bench, that's something that could maybe have negated the fact that Aberdeen were able to play with 2 solid Banksy 4 behind the ball, and as the game grew on, it almost felt like 2 solid Banksy 5. They could have maybe mixed it up a bit and got it from back to front a bit quicker, and I think that's something that Hibs have struggled with. And again, I feel like the last 3 years I've been banging my head with this about Hibs teams, but they sometimes do overplay in midfield, and there's a lot of talent in there, and sometimes they've just got to maybe say to themselves, you know what, John McGinn, you are our star player and you're our star man, but for the purpose of this game we're going to go back to front and we're going to catch these teams on the hop. And that's what Hearts done pretty well against Aberdeen. They went wide, they got the ball forward quickly in the wide areas, and that's how we got in behind them. You know, we played with one man up front throughout that game, and what Goncalves was able to do was get their centre halves turning because of how quickly we were able to push the ball from back to front. And I felt that that's something, for what I saw of the extended highlights, that Hibs seem to struggle with, and probably will explain why at home they toil against teams, because the majority of teams that will come to Easter Road, apart from say one or two, will play. I mean, Hearts, I think this is how Hearts are going to play next week. I think Hearts will be there intending to spoil the game to begin with and then try and grab whatever chances we can get on the break. So Hibs are going to have to find a way trying to get past this style of football, and it's probably why away from home they're finding a bit more joy, because a team like Celtic or Rangers will have more of a go at them, and they'll play into Hibs' hands. So you know, Neil Lennon's played the game at the highest level, he's also managed at the highest level, so I would assume that he's already identified this. The problem is, has he recruited to highlight and, you know, fix that problem, or is he going to have to go back into the transfer kitty in January?
Okay, Mark, final question on the game at the weekend, and it's one, to be honest, I didn't like asking a question like this, especially this early in the season, because it always comes across a wee bit questionable, but I did notice there was a fairly sizable thread about it on Hibs.net, and it had one specific consistent response. It was about the atmosphere at Easter Road, particularly on Saturday's game, and the fact that there's a big attendance. The Hibs fans are really turning out at the moment, but the atmosphere was still apparently pretty flat, and a lot of people raised the question there that it has something to do with the singing section being moved away from the sort of towards the centre of the East Stand up into the corner of the famous five behind the goals, and actually they think that sort of caused a bit of a drop in the noticeable atmosphere. How did you feel the atmosphere was on Saturday, and is that potentially a bit of an issue if it continues?
I sit in the West Upper, and having that kind of, well, the big drum beating you know, all the time in the North Upper, I think it does, it then opens it out to the whole ground, in my opinion. Everybody knows what's been sung when it's been sung. There's still a strong contingent in the East Stand, to be fair, that start songs. Are the two aligned? Sometimes, you know, they're not. But the atmosphere, I guess it just depends. I thought there was an okay atmosphere. Like any football match, you know, the first 10-15 minutes, you know, it's always pretty loud and proud. The Aberdeen support were okay, so I can empathise with that. I can see why people felt it was a little bit flat, but there are.
Is it something Hibs as a club have to look at, or is it something that the supporters themselves just need to be a little bit more aware of and try and contribute whatever they can to
get behind the team? Yeah, I think there is a responsibility.
I think it's a general football problem. I think a lot of clubs, when the expectation level's soar, the fans do start to sit on their hands a bit more. I've noticed it from Hearts fans. If someone was to say to me, talk about the most neutered Hearts crowd at a derby game, I would probably go back to the first derby we had after the Scottish Cup final, you know, because there's that expectation that you just have to turn up now to get a result. So when that doesn't happen, you still just keep waiting for it to happen. Whereas if someone was to say to me, over the last 3 or 4 years, what's been the most vocal Hearts support that you've came across, it was probably that season that we were getting relegated in the 2 trips to Easter Road in the League Cup and in the league, because you feel that you need to push the players on because you have less trust in them
the big thing.
Doing it off their own back.
Equally, there's no the same desperation on the part of the support. There's sometimes you go in as a supporter and you feel you need to draw a performance out of the players, whereas there are other times when you get in a mindset of go and then entertain me, and if they do, they'll get your full back
in.
You
talk to Celtic fans and they would probably say the same just now and compare their crowds to that under, say, you know, the likes of Brady and McCarry back in the sort of, you know, early to mid-90s when they weren't winning anything. It's the same thing. The crowds get bigger, and by that sort of token, there's more of a casual element to the support, and because of that, there can sometimes come you tend to find that casual fans come because there is a heightened expectation that they're going to play well, and with that there does become that fair weather mentality amongst the support, and it can rub off on some of the sort of hardcore sort of 7,000 or 8,000 that Hearts and Hibs have as supporters, or obviously season tickets have went up since that time. So I think that's just a general football thing, and I don't think that's something that Hibs can just work on their own. It's just part and parcel of it.
I think as well, what always contributes to me is there's just some games you get a gut feel, right? You're going down Easter Road and you're like, it's an important match, and whether it's a cup game, whether it's a derby, whether it's something that's getting you a trip to Hampden. I remember the last time we played Aberdeen, well, not the last time, but the Scottish Cup game, for instance, when Dominic Malonga scored the solo effort, and that was on the Scottish Cup run back in 2016. Aberdeen had been on a ridiculous run, unbeaten in the SPL at the time. Hibs were a championship club, and there was only maybe 10,000-11,000 in the ground that night, but the atmosphere was electric. And I just feel that there's an expectation sometimes, it's an SPL game, it's a Saturday afternoon, if we win, great, we're going down there, Aberdeen are undefeated, they're the better team, let's just see what happens. And I don't know, there's some games, as a fan, there's some games when I am going down to Easter Road, I was like, I'm going to be really up for this, I'm going to get really behind the crowd today. And then there's other days when actually you just don't, and you don't know why you don't, but you just don't. And that may have just been the case on Saturday. I don't know if hopefully some of the listeners can empathise with that.
Okay, right, we're going to go at a very, very quick break. This is like the old days, this battering through the time limit. So we're going to come back for a very, very quick preview, but we will certainly cover Hibs versus Celtic this weekend, and a little bit of Hearts versus St Johnstone as well. Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire.
Music for Scotland. This is Radio Saltaire.
And we're back on Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire, as we say, carrying right on through our allotted time slot, just to give you an extra bit of preview. Right, that break was quite funny for Scott and I, because Mark got a wee bit up to 90, well himself they are. He's got a few corrections and omissions he would like to make at this stage. Right, so Mark, clarify for us. Right, Dominic Malonga scored against Aberdeen in
the League Cup, not the Scottish Cup.
Okay, Martin Boyle played on
the left.
Okay, are those the main ones we had to tackle?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I've stopped sweating now.
Unless his father-in-law gets back in touch with him, then aye.
Yeah, indeed. Right, but so do you feel better now, Mark? Can you relax for this preview of the League Cup semi-final now?
I can, aye.
Okay, good. Right. What side will Martin Boyle play on Saturday? Right. The main question I want to ask in regards to the preview of the League Cup semi-final. Following the 2-2, we're going to see a different Celtic on the basis that there were a lot of omissions from their side that day. There are a lot of former Hibs element to come back for them. Are we likely to see the same Hibs?
Hibs will be up for it on Saturday.
Will it be the same team though? Will Neil Lennon take what happened at Parkhead and utilise that as, let's just go and do the same thing, give them the same scare?
Hibs are massive underdogs. I'm trying not to directly answer your question as a politician. I honestly don't know what Lennon's going to do on Saturday to mix it up. He could be in a position where, from Saturday's result, Hibs they played well. I mean, defensively, apart from really that lapse of concentration, they played well. They've still got something to prove in the final third. Some small errors that will easily, they'll be able to just take a few moments, reflect on the game, think what they can do better. But Hibs will be confident going into the game on Saturday. They're underdogs. They've already proven that they can match Celtic, at Celtic Park, may I add. And given the fact that we're going through to Hampden, both clubs have got even distribution of the ticket sales, or Celtic maybe just got slightly more, but Hibs are still going to hopefully take 20,000 through with us. I don't know if we've sold out our capacity.
Said that. I saw some suggestion today that it might be closer to 12,000.
I know, I've seen that as well, and I was quite disappointed by that actually. It's quite frustrating when you've got the allocation there. You've got a team that are one of the best teams that you put together, you know, arguably in over a decade. You've got some depth and quality in the squad there.
Well, I think the big frustration there as well is that you get the sense that anyone outside Rangers and Celtic really has to scrap and fight and really justify getting anywhere close to an equal distribution of tickets for those games.
Definitely.
So when you manage to get something equivalent to that and then you don't sell it, it feels like it actually justifies the argument for, well, next time you'll get 15,000 and you'll be happy with it.
Correct, and that's what I was about to say. Scott kind of jumped in. I was going to get to the 12,000, and it is quite frustrating, especially because, you know, we're in a position where, you know, financials count, and, you know, we want every penny that we can to be able to commit to, you know, strengthening the squad. And when the players go on runs, you know, I think over the past 10 years we've broken the old firm for appearances at Hampden. There was McGeoch came out and made comments after the Aberdeen game that he's really looking forward to Saturday because this will be his 6th trip to Hampden since he signed for Hibernian, which is fantastic, you know. And it is a rarity, you know. I've been very fortunate as a Hibs fan to go through Hampden on many occasions. I've had more negatives than I've had positives probably over the years, but nothing will beat the Scottish Cup final in 2016.
Well, that's the thing that we said on the show for a number of years, is that I kept feeling like I had to beat this drum of Hibs not being a bad cup team. They were just a bad cup finals team. They've never, certainly not for a long time, have they been a bad cup team. They're very good at navigating the tricky early rounds. They just, in theory, at times have come up against a better side, and other times the pressure of the expectancy of the support has gotten to them in the final. But actually, they're far better than other sides of a similar level in the country at navigating the tricky ties and getting themselves to Hampden. And then from there, sometimes it can be a bit of a lottery. Sometimes there's big events in the game that take place. In terms of Saturday and the big events of that, how do Hibs win it, Mark? Have you got you know, as supporters, we always play through the game before it and we go through the possible eventualities. Do you have an idea in your head of what the perfect scenario is? If Hibs are going to win it, how do they win it?
I think we definitely need to start with wingers, and at least 2 start. And this is going to be bold. At least starting 2 up front. You know, we've proven on Saturday that playing Stokes up as a lone striker it's not going to work. With us being underdogs, the expectation is for Celtic to win, and because of the depth and quality that Celtic have in their squad, the expectation probably from most Hibs fans, you know, being pragmatic about it, is that we'll probably lose the tie. So therefore, what I'd like to see is Lennon starting with an attacking formation that's going to go to Hampden and give it a shot. If we go setting up with a 4-5-1, playing a lone striker, you know, just trying to catch them on the counter, not too sure. I'd rather go walk. Well, I wouldn't be walking home, but get a lift back home, you know, having lost the tie 4-0 and giving it a shot, than going there and getting beaten 4-0 with, you know, a very defensive position and formation.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so you're using the phrase of what Hibs fans expect to, I think, tell us that you are expecting, in theory. You think, in all probability, you'll probably lose on Saturday, do you?
I think we've got a chance. You know, we're certainly going to be competitive with them. We've proven this season that we can get something out of the game against Celtic. I think we do have the strength and depth, and we've proven that we can come from behind as well in bigger games. You know, we went behind within 3 minutes against Rangers, and still came back to win the game. So, if
you had to rate it as a percentage chance, or if you were a bookie, for example, what odds would you be giving on Hibs?
Being truthful,
yeah. Where are you?
Maybe 11-8 or something like that, 2-1 for Hibs.
Okay. See, that's better odds than you'll get. I would have, but aye, I mean,
Anybody on their day,
I think that's more optimistic than the bookies will be. I think even with the scare that Hibs gave Celtic a couple of weeks ago, I think you'll be getting probably
3-4-1.
Aye,
3-4-1.
I would have thought so.
So
that shows confidence on your part.
I would echo what Mark's saying about the formation, though. I do think that you can actually go 4-5-1 and it can be positive. So you could probably go with a 5-man midfield, but make sure that, like
you've got the two wingers
on earlier, you've got Swanson and Boyle playing those wide areas either side of Stokes, and you've got that strong midfield free. It's quite a hard game to judge what Hibs are going to do because there's so many unknowns about the Celtic lineup, because there's this sort of short spell between them finishing the game in Munich on the Wednesday night to then having the lunchtime kick-off on the Saturday. There's also 50-50 rated chances on Brown and Armstrong. Can they play 2 games in a week just after recovering from their injuries? So it could be that Celtic still decide to go with albeit it'll still be a strong makeshift team, but there might be 2 or 3 players that might still get left out of that starting lineup.
I agree. If I was Neil Lennon, I think I would be going with that starting formation in terms of the 4-5-1. However, my issue with that, especially in terms of game against Celtic, is I just don't know about Stokes up front on his own against their first choice team. I just feel like he might get isolated. Is there any scenario in which you utilise Murray as a more out and out centre forward and actually Stokes plays from wide in a 4-5-1, so you get your 2 centre forwards in there but within a formation that seems to give a wee bit more to the opposition, as in that's probably the preferred formation you would go with?
I get that argument because obviously what Murray can offer you is probably more in a non-goal scoring capacity compared to Stokes.
Holding
but
the ball up.
What I would say is I think that Stokes positionally, I think he has that game intelligence to be told that if he's playing up front on his own, how to do that to utilise the rest of the team better than Murray. I think that Murray could run all day for you, but I'm not quite sure there would be a lot of actual,
that would be in the
there would be anything going on in between his lugs to actually suggest that he was going to do something to the benefit of the rest of his teammates. Murray definitely brings something to the Hibs team when he's playing his front in a front pairing, because he can create space for his fellow front man, but in terms of playing up front on his own, I struggle to see how that could work for them.
Okay, fair enough. Right, Mark, give us your prediction.
So my heart is saying 2-1 Hibs, but my head is saying 2-0 Celtic.
Okay, fair enough. Right, Scott, let's
dreams and reality.
Indeed, it would be the stuff of dreams if Hibs managed to do it. I think one of those where, to be honest, Hearts fans would be the only fans in Scotland who would be disappointed as well. Everybody else would be delighted to see sort of the invincibility eradicated of Celtic. I think Hearts fans would be disappointed because it's another cup final that Hibs would be in.
It would be a small consolation though to see Celtic lose that unbeaten run, because I do want Rodgers brought down a step or two.
Indeed, but pretty small. I think most fans at this stage are getting to the point. I'm quite looking forward to the next Celtic game, just because there's a small part of me that thinks I'd like us to do it, and even though there's no chance, even though there's a very, very small chance of that, I think most fans of Scottish teams now are thinking, well, it would be nice. It would almost be like a small trophy from the season to be the one who finally lands one on Celtic. We'll see if Hibs can do it this weekend and make that a non-discussion point going forward. Right, Hearts versus St Johnstone, second game at Murrayfield, second of 2 in the next week or so. Scott, what are your thoughts on Hearts going in? They seem to have 2 particular areas of concern, the first being full-back and the second being central midfield.
Yeah, although to be fair on the full-back front, I think St Johnstone are the type of team where you could maybe get away with maybe putting in Shellac on the left and switching Smith over to the right.
Would you do that, or would you play Brandon on the right and keep Smith on the left? Because I agree with you that
in terms of the set plays and making sure that we're stronger at set plays, I'd have Shellac in there over Brandon.
Because I agree with
and
you.
And I know that's maybe focusing on the defensive part too much, but again, you look at this fixture historically and where St Johnstone have hurt us, it has tended to be for set plays. So I do think that Shellac on the left, get Smith over to the right, and then the midfield. I noticed that Novak hasn't started tonight for the under-20s up at Aberdeen. They're playing a development league game. up in the middle of a storm. So clearly Scottish football's all about development. I mean, come on. But
it could be indoors, could it not?
No, it definitely isn't
Nothing
indoors.
up there? Okay.
No, not judging by the match reports.
Fair enough.
So Novak hasn't started, which would indicate that they're maybe keeping him fresh for the weekend. So it could be that Novak is introduced. They might even go with that 3-5-2. They might slot Novak in as part of a central midfield three, go with the two wing backs, and then the midfield. I think Callaghan will be back. Walker picks himself, and then potentially Blabin if they've not got any other sort of options in there with the front pairing sort of picking themselves.
So hang on, if it was a 3-5-2, does Novak play in the midfield or in the centre?
In the centre of defence.
Okay, that's what I needed to clarify.
With a midfield three, Blabin, Walker and Callaghan.
Okay, if they stay as a back four, we've mentioned there, like I say, I think I agree, both Jellic adds something in terms of defending set pieces, but also if you're going purely on the basis of let's get my best players in their best positions, then you would always want Smith at right back. So if there's an opportunity to choose an option to do that, you go with it. The only issue there is Jellic looked exposed in a back four previously, so if you are wanting to play a back four, that becomes a slight issue, at least in terms of on the bigger park at Murrayfield, offside trap and things like that, because he certainly got caught out by Lee Griffiths at Celtic Park on that front. So the midfield, it looks to me like if everyone's fit that we think has a potential to be fit, you're probably looking at Cowie, Callaghan and Buaban as being the first choice three. Would you agree with those three?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, and do you think we'll continue with the front three of Lafferty, Isma and Walker playing in that formation?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Okay, if that, all of that being the case, and there are no further injury scares, and Callaghan makes it, and Cowie makes it, and there's quite a lot of question marks over the team. If all of that goes to plan, what do you expect to see happen on Saturday?
I expect to see us try and attack from the first minute. I think there will be a bit more positivity about our play. Craig Levein, it's not rocket science what he tries to attempt to do as a manager of a club like Hearts or Dundee United. He tends to try and scrap and fight for points whichever way he can get them away from home, and try and build a side that becomes very formidable at home, which we were. I think outside the Old Firm we were undefeated at Tynecastle under Levein for 2 full seasons. So this is where he sees us becoming a top 3 or 4 side, and you can't really argue with the results. You can maybe sometimes argue with the way that it's achieved, but ultimately the results, win the day for the manager. So I think that we will go a bit more direct. I think that we'll attempt to sort of try and play away from the midfield given the lack of options that we have. So I think the plan will be to try and get Walker as far up top as we can as well, and try and play with that front three, and then just hope that the defence proves to be as steady as they have been over the course of the season, bar 1 or 2 sort of mishaps. They've been fairly solid. So I'm quietly confident we could maybe get a 2-0 result at the weekend.
Okay, good. Positive. Both sides, despite a disappointment for Hibs this week, Mark seems to have a streak of defiance in him that thinks that there is a wee chance of this happening on Saturday. So it would certainly rock the cart in Scottish football, and a win for Hearts also, as we've mentioned, would see them climbing the table up into the top 6, which I think certainly a more subtle shock, but given the difficulty, given the chaos that's happened at Tynecastle, at least on a footballing side, that in itself would be a fairly positive start to the season as well. So we will see. We'll see if we're celebrating come this weekend and come Monday night, and we also have a relatively significant game to preview next week, because it's the first derby of the season, the first league derby in over 3 years. So in that sense, next week will be a rather big one. So no matter what, make sure that you're tuned in next week to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. Scott, I'm going to give you just 30 seconds to a minute here just to give another wee plug for your charity night, because I know that ticket sales are going very, very well, but there are some last opportunities for people to get in there.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 149 spaces booked. which is, and I know that the number's not great given that we're plugging a Hibs show, but there is 51 spaces left. So there's been quite a few comedic references on Facebook and on Twitter with regards to that. But if you do want to book a space for your team, all I require just now is really just the number of members of the team and the team name, and the email address has been already put out everywhere with regards to the the social media. So just keep in touch with ourselves. Even if you want to just send a direct message over to our Facebook and Twitter pages, we can provide you with all the relevant details. The event is taking place on Sunday, November the 5th at the Hibs Social Club at Sunnyside. It'll be kicking off at about 7:30. As I mentioned before, there's some really good prizes with regards to the raffle. There's going to be some corporate hospitality for a Hibs home game, a couple of sort of exclusive sort of signed Hibs prizes as well, alongside some other really nice sort of prizes alongside that, and also there's going to be the opportunity to just have a nice bit of light-hearted banter with regards to some of the quiz questions.
Okay,
especially the section that focuses on Hearts' failings. There's going to be a specific
that'll be
round for that, which I'm really going to enjoy.
Yeah, as if the Hearts team that will be present will be isolated enough already. That'll just add to the joy of the occasion. I'm sure we'll make some lovely new Hibs friends. We'll see. Okay, right, on that, all that remains is for me to thank you guys for your time. Thanks Mark, thanks Scott, and thank you very much at home for listening. This has been Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. Cheers.